Okay, so welcome to Everything Marketplaces. So this is episode 7, and we bring on marketplace founders, operators, and leaders as guests. So today I'm excited to welcome Josh Breinlinger, who has both operator and investor experience at top marketplaces, and some you've probably heard of. So quite a few in the group, you probably know Josh from his blog, A Crowded Space. But Josh, a warm welcome, and maybe you can just kind of start off by talking a little bit about your background for those that don't know you.
For sure, and thanks for having me. I love marketplace founder groups. Those are my favorite people. So my background, I grew up in New Hampshire. I was part of a very, are there more people from New Hampshire? That's amazing. The odds are low on that, but it was basically a very nerdy engineering family. My dad went to MIT, my older brother went to MIT, so I did the same thing, went to MIT and was a mechanical engineer. And I did that for about 4 years. I used to build real stuff like Stirling engines and fuel injectors, and built a fryolator for Burger King, all sorts of kind of random consulting projects. But then I moved out to San Francisco in 2004, and I was part of the founding team at oDesk, which many of you may know. Went on to acquire Elance, become Upwork, and is now public and the world's largest freelance labor marketplace. So I was kind of that like early business generalist type on the team. So over the course of 5 years, I ran sales, product, community operations, marketing, and biz dev. And I fell in love with marketplaces, and basically been doing it now for the last 15, 16 years. After oDesk, I did a couple years, I guess, sort of figuring out if I wanted to stay on the entrepreneur path or go the venture path. Venture won in the end. But in the middle, I ran product and marketing at AdRoll, which many of you may know, display advertising and retargeting. Helped co-found a company called Rev, which does speech to text, audio transcription. And I did another failed side project, but won't go into too many details on that one. But I ended up going into venture capital and joined a large firm called Sigma Partners that had $1.5 billion under management. And then a couple of years later, the team that was on the West Coast spun out and formed what is now Jackson Square Ventures. So that's where I've been a partner for the last 8 years now. And we have 3 funds. First 2 funds are about 120 million. Third fund is 193 million. Fortunately, or just lucky, we raised it the middle of last year. So I do not envy anyone that's trying to fundraise right now. But we, as a firm, we're focused on early stage investments in SaaS and marketplaces. We typically write checks that are anything from 1 to 7 million as an initial check. Sweet spot's kind of right in the middle. And we're very long-term investors, very high conviction investors. And I wore my t-shirt for you. We're anti-hype investors.
I love it.
So what that means is, first of all, you can look through the whole portfolio and you won't find any crypto or drones or scooters. But what you do find are companies that are going after massive existing markets, using pretty well understood technology, when there are weak or fragmented incumbents. Those are the things we like. And, I think if you look through the really big success stories, you'll find that a lot of them are just making things better, but it's very similar to previous incumbents. So, look at Zoom. We've had WebEx and Skype and everything else for years, probably decades. But then Zoom comes along and just did it better and becomes this giant company. Same thing is very true of lots of the big tech success stories. I'm fortunate to be an early investor in OfferUp, which is the largest peer-to-peer classifieds marketplace, and it's very much like Craigslist. Craigslist has been doing this forever, but OfferUp came along and did it better. And so those are the sort of things we like. My personal focus is all marketplaces. It's what I love. I can't help it. So that's why I'm here.
Awesome. Yeah, that's why we're having you on. So let's take a step back, if we can, and maybe talk a little bit about kind of oDesk and your experience there. So I'm kind of interested because you said you did quite a bit and touched a bunch of different areas there within the business. So, you know, how did you gain that experience across, you know, across the business?
Yeah, so oDesk was really fascinating. In the early days when I started, we didn't even really have a marketplace, or not in what you would expect to see. What we had was just an internal database of about 80 freelance programmers from Russia. And we had these tools for really managing and paying freelancers anywhere in the world. And so initially, I was effectively a recruiter. So people would call in and say, "Hey, this looks really interesting," and I'd be on the phone talking to a customer, and then I'd be on live chat with all the programmers in the entire marketplace and be like, all right, Mike needs 2 programmers for the next 2 months. Anybody available? Like, anybody want to talk to them?" And I would manually connect people. And this is a bit of a tangent, but I think I did sales for about a year, maybe a year and a half there in the early days. And I think everyone in almost any career should do sales for some period of their career, because it's just, at the end of the day, it's black and white. Did you make the sale or not? And there's actually a lot less BS in sales because it's black and white. You can't get wrapped up in theory of product loops and all these other things. At the end of the day, you got to sell it. And so that experience was phenomenal and was really customer research and customer development. And so that time running sales, I figured out how we should build the marketplace, what was really important to people, what were people looking for in skills and certification and availability, and that helped inform sort of my next role there, which was building out the product and the marketplace and the operation side of things. And then as the company grew, I personally really thrive in very early stage environments. And so as we built up sales and then built up product, I kept moving on to the next challenge within the company. And the next one was marketing and growth. And so, nowadays it would probably be called a growth hacker or something like that. But that's what I was doing for the rest of my time at oDesk there.
Nice. Right. And then maybe can you talk a little bit more about the kind of transition into Rev?
Sure. So when I said I really like the earlier stages. So once oDesk got to be a few hundred employees and was growing, I really wanted to move back to earlier stage stuff. So I decided to move on. That was, I think, 2010. And first I went to AdRoll, ran product and marketing, because when I was running marketing at oDesk, I realized this whole retargeting thing was incredible. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to be huge. We got to go do this. And, I really only ended up there full-time for 7 months because the investors that led the Series A in oDesk, and my partner today, Greg Gretsch, he was my board member at oDesk. And then after I left, he came to me and it's like, God damn it, can't believe you left. But since you did, you should come join us in venture capital. So I got that opportunity, jumped at it. And for the first couple of years in venture, I was an associate, where basically I was not a partner yet, so wasn't leading deals, and had the freedom to explore new opportunities, to I still wasn't sure, even the first couple of years in venture, was I going to do this long term, or was this just a 1 or 2 year stopover? So during that time, some of my closest friends, Jason Chicola, who was also on the founding team at oDesk, came and wanted to start Rev. And so I helped him get it started. And over the course of the next few months, we split up, we launched it. We launched the first part of the marketplace, which was actually translation, not transcription initially. But we always had the plan to add additional verticals. And so that ended up moving to transcription, and we quickly realized that the transcription side was a much better business. But during the course of that time, I decided that I really wanted to dedicate full time to venture. So I rolled out of operating at Rev, remain on the board today, and focus most of my time looking for great new marketplaces.
Nice, nice. So you did just mention as far as kind of verticals, and I know you've written quite extensively in the past about kind of vertical and versus kind of horizontal marketplaces, and I definitely wanted to bring that up as a talking point today.
So you're doing a vertical marketplace. I think most people are probably doing vertical marketplaces, would be my guess.
Yeah.
I think the conventional wisdom is vertical approaches, whether it's marketplaces or SaaS, is maybe a little bit lower risk, but also a little bit lower opportunity. And horizontals are, higher failure rates, but potentially higher opportunities. You look at the truly biggest marketplaces, eBay, Amazon, Alibaba, sort of things. Most of them are horizontal. There's some exceptions. You could argue Airbnb is a vertical, but of course they've started expanding into kind of all travel sort of stuff. For me, the debate between horizontal versus vertical, or trying to figure out which way to go, I think you can distill it down to what type of industry are we in, and what are the characteristics of the transaction. So how frequent is the transaction, and what's the price of the transaction? If you look at those two things, it creates this interesting dynamic. You have, okay, imagine super high frequency but super low price. That's things like Uber and Lyft and Postmates and DoorDash. And so they're highly verticalized, because nobody wants to spend a lot of time figuring out how to order food. You want to just click a button and it happens. And to get that experience, you kind of need a vertical, right? Because a horizontal is going to require more back and forth and stuff like that. And then there's the other side, what's super high price but super low frequency. And that leads to things like Zillow and Redfin and everything else, right? Where you buy a house once every 7 or 10 years or something on average, but a super high price. Now that can be verticalized, but the way you monetize it is totally different. Nobody wants the Uber for buying a house where you just click a button and you bought $1 million house. Like, nobody wants that. You want to be able to browse and search and research and talk to people and save listings and browse over the course of years, potentially, to find the house you're looking for. So those extremes, I think, work very well as verticals. But then there's everything else. Then there's everything, you think services like locksmiths and plumbers and stuff like that. And why is there no Uber for locksmiths? Well, actually there are. I think I got 3 pitches for the Uber for locksmiths. Hopefully nobody is working on that business, because I can tell you right now, it's not going to work. The dynamics are terrible. I've maybe spent $300 in my life on locksmiths, and I don't need an app for that. I can go to Yelp or Craigslist or whatever, because I use it so infrequently that a little bit of extra pain and effort to make that happen is no big deal. I'm not going to spend the time to go find some amazing vertical service for something I use so infrequently. And so the opportunity, when you think about all those services, it has to be grouped as a horizontal, right? The only way to get the frequency up is to expand across a whole bunch of different verticals. So there may very well be a great horizontal marketplace that does all home services, gardening and fence repair and gutter cleaning and locksmith. But if you group every single thing together, then you can have an interesting marketplace. And that's what you have things more like Thumbtack, frankly, more like oDesk, Upwork. Those are the things where, you group those all as a horizontal, and it can be a really big business.
Yeah.
By the way, the other really interesting category is, which is fun to think about, are where do you get really high frequency and high price? Which you would think like, that's the gold mine. If you can find both high frequency and high price, that would be amazing. And what tends to happen there is it leads you to things that sometimes are very difficult to monetize. Like, what do you spend a lot of money on? It's like rent and childcare as a consumer, but then there's a ton of B2B cases, and as a consumer, it's really hard for a marketplace to insert themselves in rent or childcare, because I just don't need a marketplace. Once I find my kid's school, that's it. I just pay the school directly. So you can't really get in the loop there. In B2B, I think is where it's really interesting. The right model tends not to be the rake on the transaction. It's the same sort of thing. Like, if you have big businesses dealing with each other, they know how to bill and pay each other, right? It's very well established. Nobody needs any help there. But what can happen is you can monetize just much more as a subscription membership fee. So I'm on the board of a company called Crexy, which is a commercial real estate marketplace. And it works in very similar ways. There's commercial real estate brokers, there's buyers. They do this as relatively high frequency when you consider that they're average $5 million transactions. But we don't take a transaction fee because that's a well-established payment loop of broker gets X% and all the other people take their fees. But we charge a membership fee, which is for premium listings and premium services and all those things, and people are thrilled to pay it, and the business is doing great. So you just monetize in different ways when you're talking high frequency, high price.
Nice. Yeah, thanks for giving the example on Crexy too, because I was actually going to ask about that. So, because I know it's quite a higher AOV. So, so I actually do have a question, which is, right now, kind of due to the challenges in the economy and what we're going through, there's a lot of vertical marketplaces that might be thinking about going horizontal, just due to what we're all going through. How have you kind of been speaking with marketplaces about that, and what are you seeing maybe?
Yeah, well, I will say, if you're completely verticalized, you're sort of at the whims of the economy. If you were in home fitness equipment, you're probably doing great. Travel and hotels, you're not doing so good right now. So in some ways, horizontal marketplaces are much more resilient. So OfferUp, you can buy and sell anything. And there are some categories that are way down, and there are more categories that are way up because of that. And so, just since it's completely out of most people's control, the horizontal marketplaces do have some more resiliency. I haven't seen yet any marketplaces like completely abandon their vertical and go horizontal, but I have seen, like, I'm also an investor and on the board at a company called bus.com. So bus.com is basically like Expedia for charter buses. So you can go online and book a charter a bus. Pretty obviously, a lot of those trips got canceled. A lot of group travel got canceled. That was of course completely out of our control. What we're seeing now, though, is we're not abandoning the vertical, but we're going to different customer segments. So just hypothetically, imagine it was a bunch of group travel and school and sports team travel. Well, maybe that's shifting to more corporate commuting and government, sort of augmenting mass transit systems and things like that. So the things are shifting, and if you're doing that sort of thing, just segment your users. And there are groups that are coming back pretty quickly now, but certainly the demand has shifted a ton in places like that.
Got it. Well, that's great. So bus.com, it sounds like, is that a lower frequency, higher AOV also marketplace, or?
So bus.com is a fascinating one. When I first started looking at it, I thought it was going to be like the locksmith example, right? It's like, well, geez, how many times have I booked a bus? It's just not that frequent. But what's fascinating is when you dig a little deeper, there are groups of users that are actually high frequency purchasers. So think sports team, but some of the examples that I just went through. But you start thinking like corporate commute and shuttles and employee shuttles and tour groups and travel groups and wedding planners. There's tons of these individual segments that are truly high frequency purchasers. And there are some groups that spend millions of dollars a year on bus travel. which is pretty remarkable when you dig into the industry a little bit deeper. So they do have a lot of volume.
Nice. So, just to ask a question about that a little bit more. So, are they capturing the professional or like a B2B kind of use case in the market and also the consumer, or how do they kind of balance that?
Yeah, it's actually more B2B than consumer. It's just like, I mean, I think like most consumers, you just don't book a bus very often. Now, there's part of the opportunity is if you can aggregate the whole B2B market and have all the supply of charter buses, that unlocks all sorts of new opportunities. And one of them, sorry, let me turn off desktop notifications here. One of the opportunities is once you understand and have all the buses and you understand where they are, and you also understand various travel patterns of like, hey, there's a whole bunch of people from San Francisco trying to go to Coachella. Well, that's interesting. Now we can build our own bus transit service because we know where everything is going, and we can allow, for individual tickets and sort of these dynamic trips to organize because we know that demand. So that's part of the vision, but that's a long-term vision where, it takes time to build the flywheel and get all the supply on board. Then we can offer a pretty new and I think pretty interesting service to the demand side.
Nice. Nice. And then, so I do have another kind of talking point that I wanted to bring up, and it was, you mentioned previously about commodity versus kind of master marketplaces. So.
Yeah, that's one of my theories. So, I increasingly believe that, first of all, I'm an Amazon super fan. Amazon's amazing. It shows up at my house pretty much every day. But they can't win everything. It's not possible because there are, and that's why I think there became a big opportunity for a company like Farfetch, which I haven't tracked closely, but now I think it's a $10 billion market cap or something like that, luxury marketplace. And you see what happens there, and Amazon is, like, to me, pretty much perfect for commodity retail stuff. But there's a whole host of luxury goods that do not want to be on the Amazon platform. They could increase sales probably, but it would ruin their brand, and they want a different type of relationship with the consumer. And I think that's true in goods and services. And, I know that, one simple example, you think about oDesk or Upwork, and many of the most talented freelancers, the best programmers, they probably don't want to participate on Upwork. And that's because it's closer to a commodity service, even though they have, really talented software developers, designers, everything. It's closer to a commodity service. You look at like unbelievably talented freelancers, they don't take these certification tests and apply to jobs. They're actively recruited. And so the experience and the workflows for those sorts of people are just completely different. And they're looking for different things. You look at something like Masterclass, which is part of what made me start thinking about this, is, you would never do a Masterclass that's like, hey, one-on-one video training with Gordon Ramsay for cooking. Like, no, that's never going to work. The price just does not make sense. And so the motivations, the workflows, the whole dynamics of how the marketplace works are just completely different when you think about the extreme ends of these equations. And, when you want commodity, you want to just click purchase really quick and easy. And the master ones just want something very different.
Do you have any examples of any portfolio companies that kind of maybe some of the best examples that fit the master marketplace, or those that you've recently seen?
Yeah, so I'm an investor in a company called Outlierorg. So it's actually started by one of the co-founders of Masterclass, and Outlierorg is online education. And it's for credit college courses. Right now, they just launched. They have calculus and psychology. Those are their only 2 courses. But they went around and they cast and they found what they believe are some of the best professors in the country for these subjects. And they did a very high production, high investment into the content for those classes. And I suppose that to me is the master marketplace, right? Heavy investment, one-to-many, record your thing, and the marketplace like gets heavily involved in production. And then there's, things that are more like Udemy, right? Where I can go launch a course online on Udemy. I can put together 10 PowerPoint slides and call it a course and try to charge some people. And it's very low curation, low friction, low investment. And those are 2 very, very different sort of models. I think they can both be successful, which I think is the interesting thing. None of this is like, this one's better than this one. It's just, I think you kind of have to know which way you're going and tailor all of your marketplace activities to that. And, Udemy is maybe going after much more of the long tail, and Outlier is going after something else.
Yeah.
So that's probably the best example I have.
That's a really good example though. So nice.
Market networks.
Cool. Oh yeah, we already got questions coming in. So yeah, let's go and maybe start a few questions if that's okay.
Sure. So let's see. I'll do Suzanne's first. So I'm assuming it's not really advisable to expand into a horizontal if you're still establishing your vertical. I think it's pretty hard to give any kind of blanket advice on that. If your vertical's just been totally destroyed by this thing, I guess you got to pivot and do something else. But my gut is that in most cases, it's probably better to just figure out how to help that vertical. We have another marketplace that's in festival ticketing, right? So, it's a company called Lyte, Lyte, and they started by basically being a secondary marketplace, trying to remove scalpers from the whole ticketing equation. Because, if you go to StubHub or Viagogo or something like that, all the inventory that you're buying is from scalpers. And it's this big problem with the ticketing industry. It's really stupid. We've always said okay, tickets go on sale at 9 a.m. and then by 9:01 they're sold out because there's a bunch of bots that showed up that try to price it higher on secondary markets. And so there's these scalpers that are currently adding no value, just taking a big piece of the pie. Makes no sense. Now, it made sense 30 or 40 years ago before we had the internet and distribution channels that made sense, but it doesn't make sense anymore. So Lyte came along and said, well, that's stupid. Why don't we just let people return tickets? You get your face value back, just like you would in any sort of e-commerce setting. And we have a wait list of demand, and that just goes to the next person in line. And then they also offered the primary ticket. So, hey, it makes no sense to issue tickets based on the order that you showed up in. Why don't we just prioritize whoever we want? So you can prioritize your loyal fans. If you've bought tickets before, you get priority in the queue. Or we could just make it a simple lottery system. So take all the orders, and then it's just a simple lottery. That's a much better system than just letting all the scalpers take all the inventory. So anyway, point is, in this particular case, obviously festivals are not happening right now, but those businesses still have a ton of needs. And so we've shifted our focus to basically help all these organizers deal with refunds and postponements and increased transaction liquidity. They still have needs. The vertical still exists. It's just the needs have changed. And so I don't know what vertical you're in, but I imagine there's needs that you can shift to. And it's maybe less about immediate transactions, more about something else.
Can I just address that really quickly?
Sure.
I'll just be super quick. So our marketplace matches older homeowners with long-term lodgers or boarders of any age. Clearly with COVID, nobody is moving anywhere. But because they're older, they demand services, which they keep asking me about. Couldn't you get someone to clean the room before the person turns up? Couldn't you get someone to decorate the room maybe? Or, you know, just tell me how I need to decorate it. So clearly they're struggling to even get on the platform because they see that the barrier to entry is quite high for them in terms of what they need to do. And I see that I could fulfill that by going horizontal, but that feels like a big ask from me at this point.
Well, horizontal, how you mean to offer all these different services like cleaning and renovation? And,
Yeah.
Got it. Well, I mean, it's still, I wouldn't totally call that horizontal. You know, I think it's still, you're solving the needs of a vertical industry or a segment of these homeowners. You know, I think you could probably do a lot just with content marketing, honestly, of like, okay, you're getting ready. You're like, we all know the market's gone, but what can you do while we're sitting around wondering? And, you know, it's a lot of do-it-yourself home improvement stuff, which is way up right now. So, you know, maybe there's a lot that you could do without totally changing the product, just doing with more content marketing, blogging, videos, and things like that.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Cool. Yeah, so actually, I know we have another member that posted a question earlier, Sumya, had a really good question. He's in the healthcare marketplace. You wanna come on, Sumya?
Yeah. Hey, Josh. So we are a marketplace, I would say a SaaS-enabled marketplace for the medical device industry.
Okay.
You know, and one of the questions I had was, we do offer our SaaS platform as a subscription to the medical device companies, and then they sort of oversubscribe for experts or consultants depending on where they are in their journey. So this could be regulatory work, quality, and other kinds of things. So one of the questions I had was, is there a preference to when we should be doing a more bid-based model where they post what they need and we allow bids to come up, versus curation? And I have this question specifically because our customers on the SMB side ask for both the tools and the experts. But on the enterprise side, today, it is only the SaaS tools that they use. Like, so any insights on that as to, and is this like a progression, or is this something that we should already start thinking?
Well, so without knowing too many details about, you know, specifically what your software does, what's the, just like really quick, what's the value prop on just the SaaS?
Yeah, it's actually business process automation tools. So these are like, consider one of the tools is a TurboTax for FDA submissions, right? So we automate that.
Okay, so I guess my quick thought would be, you know, I think the SaaS-enabled marketplaces work well if the software makes the service providers more effective and more productive. Like, that's the whole point of all this, is make things more productive and efficient. And so if it accomplishes that, then great. And, you know, it sounds like the SaaS that you're talking about applies to everyone, right? Whether you're using your service providers or not. So that's actually wonderful. So instinct would be to, you know, sort of aggressively roll that out and make it really cheap, and, you know, have it be a kind of land and expand of, that's the way to get your foot in the door kind of thing. It's just gut instinct. With respect to kind of the moving to a bid model versus like standard curated service type model, I think it all depends on how standardized the service is, right? If, you know, like, no one can do a completely standard bid for software development because it's wildly different every single time, right? But, you know, you can do standardized bids for taxi rides because it's always exactly the same. Get me from point A to point B. That's standard. So it all depends how standardized it can be. In general, if you can standardize it, I think it's wonderful because it just increases the efficiency and the liquidity and the fill ratio and everything else. Because once you have bids, yeah, they call it like double commit. Like I post a job, someone bids, I negotiate, he accepts, you know, like it's this back and forth, which you know is just going to be a funnel with tons of drop off in the conversion rates. But if it's just like, you know, $100, click, done, that's great, 100% conversion. So if you can standardize it and it's reasonable to do it, then I would do it.
Okay, so
I don't know.
A follow-up question. So kind of look at one service at a time and see if there are opportunities to standardize them. Because I'm seeing that pattern with some of these early services that we're offering through our marketplace.
Okay. Yeah, that would be my instinct. Again, unless it's very custom and varied and everybody has different needs, then you just can't. And that's the wrong service. But if you can, it's great. And if the customers don't care really who the service provider is, then great. Like I don't really care who my taxi driver is or who delivers my groceries. Don't really care. But you know, if it's like high-end consulting and like quality varies a ton, then you can't do it.
Yeah.
So that
sure. Thank you.
Just comes down to the specific use case. Sure. You want me to get to the other question from Farhaj?
Yeah, actually, so we have one of the group members that messaged in the B2B channel earlier, Suzanne. I think she was going to come on and ask a question first.
Hey, I'm here.
Hey.
So I wanted to ask a question about quality, because I've seen on some of your other talks sort of your framework of optimize, retain, expel to get rid of poor quality supply. One of the things that we've experienced is, you know, you encounter poor quality supply, you want to expel them, but our buyers in searching find that same service provider off our marketplace, and then they come to us and say, well, we actually found another option offline, off your marketplace, it's cheaper. And you know, we're in this kind of predicament, like, do we tell them? Usually they obviously don't tell us the name of the person or a services marketplace, but you know, what are the ways that you can keep quality high and signal to buyers that like your marketplace is doing the appropriate quality control, while kind of disputing this hypothesis that they may always have, which is maybe there's someone else out there that's cheaper, that's off the marketplace? Because you can't make grandiose claims like all the best people are on our marketplace. You can prove it over time, but they do find these poor suppliers and then have their bad experience, but no one wins in that formula. So thoughts on that kind of dilemma?
Yeah. Yep. What industry are you in?
We're providing consulting services for international foreign assistance.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, my immediate answer is, you know, if they want to go off the platform and get a cheap, low quality service provider, amen. Go ahead. It's all yours. You deal with the fallout. And look, Rev started and we basically said, hey, we are low cost, you know, high quality and fastest turnaround time. Now, we're not the lowest cost. And if you want to go find somebody to do transcripts for 50 cents a minute, go right ahead. We guarantee it will give you more pain and suffering, require more effort from you, more back and forth, more quality control. If that's what you want, please go ahead. We don't want you as a customer. And I think you have to kind of take that stance, because you can't be everything to everyone. And there are some people that will always just seek out the absolute lowest cost, but I don't think that's really what you want to provide. You know, I think there's cost, quality, and turnaround time are kind of or speed are kind of the three things. And it's really tough to be the absolute lowest cost, because there's always ways to do it cheaper. And I think a core part of any marketplace's value prop is like, you know, part of the quality and the turnaround time and efficiency. And that costs more money. That's it. So I just wouldn't worry about it that much. You know,
Thanks.
if you are confident that they're low quality and delivering low quality services, you don't want them on your marketplace. That's it. Like it's very straightforward. You don't want them on, and you know that people can go try to seek out business in other ways, and that's fine.
Yeah, thanks. No, I mean, one of the things we've done is we've kept some of the poor quality quality suppliers on the marketplace, but we only keep them there to reference them, to say like, oh, here's, Joe Blow, who you probably also found on LinkedIn, and just so you know, like, he's received poor ratings. But like that doesn't really feel like a very, I still don't want their names on the marketplace. It doesn't really, improve the brand quality by keeping them there. But I appreciate your thoughts. Thanks.
Totally agree. By the way, we have this exact same problem at oDesk because, if you think about the issue for a second, say some freelancer, they might be working with 3 different customers and they're still applying to new jobs. And then we get confidence that actually this person's low quality. We need to get them off. But then we're like, well, geez, do we just fully kick them out and cancel their other projects? That doesn't seem like the right thing to do. Do we block them from applying to any new jobs so they just like taper off? Well, we could do that, but then they're going to go to their existing clients and try to disintermediate and say like, screw oDesk, we're taking this off. There's no easy answer. It's a tricky problem, especially if you're in these like sort of multi-project sort of things. But I can guarantee you that some of the best decisions we made were when we got much more aggressive with quality and kicking people out. You just have to do it.
Thanks.
Awesome. That was a great question. Hey, so on that kind of note, Josh, I actually had someone leave a question on the Google Doc from earlier, and it was Stefanet Flippa who was asking about dealing with non-serious buyers. So on the buyer side, and then he was asking about, for example, on OfferUp, how they deal with that potential issue.
Yeah, it's a big problem. Like we always talk about quality and instinctively we think about the supply side. But the buyer side quality is very real, and it's a real problem, and people try to take advantage of the systems and everything. I wish I had better examples of people that have done this very well. Honestly, I don't think anybody's done it exceptionally well. We just like we've been so focused on the supplier and service quality side of things that typically, thinking about buyer quality is like an afterthought. I do think there's like the interesting thing about a marketplace like oDesk is the suppliers have figured it out. The good freelancers, they know just from looking at a job post if this is a quality buyer or not, and so they know if they want to waste their time or not. And you can tell, like, just look at some of the job descriptions. It's like, hey, I want a clone of Amazon for $1,000. It's like, okay, well, you're an idiot. So, let's move on to a higher quality buyer. I think the strategy we did at oDesk is not great, but it's something, which was we just tried to make that quality highly visible, like make it easy to tell. Rather than aggressively like kicking people out and screening people and doing all this stuff, we just made it very easy to tell if this was a quality person or not. But that's not great because that still diminishes the value of your marketplace, and it's frustrating to the supply side. So I think it's a really delicate balance because the natural way you would increase quality is increase some friction and require credit cards, require deposits, require some onboarding or training, but all those things increase friction and reduce conversion. And it's finding that right balance. And it's really tricky. So I think it's kind of this like constant iteration and tweaking, and hopefully, you just sort of design some levers, like, just give you one simple example. Like let's pretend it's a credit card deposit. Maybe, you treat it as a lever, and like you find $100 deposit. Well, we're still getting tons of low quality. So maybe it needs to be a $500 deposit, or maybe we went too strict and maybe we need to go down to a $1 deposit, like something that you can kind of move up and down. is super helpful in these things. But that's a tricky one. So let me know, please, if anyone figures out a really great buyer quality filter. I'm all ears, because it's a constant problem everywhere, and it's the fight. Literally, it's a internal fight between like a growth team and a quality team. I've seen I used to fight the fights of the growth team versus the fraud team, right? Fraud team wants to put in all these things that increase friction, and growth is trying to take them out.
Yeah, I've heard you talking about that before, and it definitely resonated with me too. So cool. And then Sumi, I think did you want to ask your question about the Science Exchange?
Yeah, I do. So Josh, I had a question, and I heard this in your one of the sessions over on YouTube. You talk about Science Exchange. I'm curious, from looking at the website, doesn't seem they have tools to stop disintermediation. Are there any learnings that you could share in terms of how Science Exchange manages it? Because we're essentially trying to do the same. We just put our tools first so that we tackle disintermediation head on.
Yeah.
And then building the marketplace. So anything you could share?
Yeah, hopefully there's nobody from Science Exchange here, because I'm about to sort of ream them. So sorry.
There's not, by the way, so unless they watch a recording.
All right. So I think the fundamental problem with Science Exchange and scientists is neither party really wants to be there. The buyers don't really want to be there, and the sellers don't really want to be there. And they don't want to transact on the platform. And I looked at some of these companies, and I talked to some of the suppliers, and 100% of them want to disintermediate. And it's because you have relatively large businesses on both sides of the transaction. And then you have a marketplace that's saying, hey, pay me a rake, pay me 5%, 10%, whatever. And the only value to the platform was discovery, right? And I think if the only value to the platform is discovery, well, then why would someone keep paying you years later? And these relationships last years and years and years. And, in some cases might be many millions of dollars. Why would anyone keep paying a marketplace? Like a much simpler example is, there's take care.com is a very tangible example. Like I've paid care.com for a 1-month subscription. I found a nanny, and then I canceled my subscription, and I never want to use them ever again. There is no way I would pay a marketplace for my nanny. Not a chance, right? And so I think that's the fundamental problem with some of these, and that's why I sort of hinted at, if it's high frequency, high price, I think you need to, your value is discovery. So what you should charge and how you should structure your model is just like a membership fee that's the membership fee that you pay to be on the platform and enhance discovery. And you're basically paying for leads. Like that's what you're paying for. So I think it's a real struggle. And I as one of the things as a VC I look at when I am evaluating marketplaces, I get really worried when there's not much fragmentation, because then the buying power and purchasing power will go to the buyers or sellers, not to the marketplace. I also get really worried if people outgrow the marketplace, right? Like if you have something where it works really well when you're like a low value buyer, but then as you get bigger, you just go direct. That's a big problem, because then all that happens is you churn your best users, which really sucks.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. And then I think Faraj, did you want to come on?
Yeah, I'd love to. Hey, Josh, we have a assassinevil marketplace that helps cannabis businesses hire on-demand workers and manage the full-time staff.
Cool.
I've been really exploring the concept of market networks. For example, I read an article about SmartCat, which is like the translators marketplace. They have a network of translators. Then they have the marketplace where they help businesses hire the translators, and they sell workflow solutions on a SaaS subscription. And they mentioned it's a really great way to capitalize on niche marketplaces. So would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah. you know, I know NFX has popularized the whole market network term. It's, and, you know, I think it's, to me, I always struggle a little bit with like the terminology because it changes every year and people mean different things. Like people ask me like, what is a marketplace? I'm like, give me a break. Like I'm not an academic. You know, there's buyers and sellers. What do you want? You know, this notion that like Uber's not a real marketplace because it's just automatically matched. Like whatever. So anyway, that's my academic rant. I subscribe more to the Nassim Taleb school of thought. But I think the key thing to figure out, no matter what you call it, is how does the flywheel work, right? And I would really encourage everyone to, you know, get a notepad and start drawing your flywheel, right? And it's not just a simple more buyers equals more sellers, yay, right? Like that's the ultra simplified version. That's not the reality for anybody. The reality for anybody is a little more complex, and you might have one little flywheel, but then there's one little spin out flywheel that's like, okay, more demand on the platform means drivers have higher utilization and earnings power, and then that results in more referrals, and that gets a nice little loop. And one trap is I think some people are a little bit delusional about their flywheel. Right. And so I think it makes sense to sort of constantly test the assumptions of like, hey, does higher utilization really lead to more referrals or not? And, you know, if it doesn't, you need to sort of rethink how you go about the business. But I would just work on the flywheel. And, you know, for a business like yours, you know, it's very possible that there's a ton of value for you to provide regulatory sort of compliance, like automate the compliance process for people so that it's just much more efficient. I kind of assume that's what you're doing. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me, because then people are going to want to stay on the platform, because is anyone going to be like, oh, I really don't want to manage, or do I want to deal with all this paperwork and crap myself? No. Yeah, so, you know, I think just figure out.
I think that
flywheel,
answers it. And
right,
one of
cool.
like a tangential question is like in labor marketplaces, you know, I've noticed that a lot of people have started to launch educational products layered on top of it and offer like upskilling as a service. I was curious if you had any portfolio companies that ran that experiment and, you know, what happened.
Yeah, it's really hard. And I think that's one of the sort of like next frontiers for marketplaces is upskilling, and also just this notion of career progression, and also this notion of team formation. You know, like if you want to hire a single freelance programmer, Upwork is unbelievably good. If you need a team of 30 people, it's a little difficult. And so, you know, I do think, but theoretically it works great, right? It's like the whole Hollywood movie studio analogy of like, hey, a project forms and we just pick all these best people and they come together for a project and then they disband. And that's really great in theory. In practice, it's exceptionally difficult for any manager to deal with that. So I do think that's kind of one of the next frontiers is showing this both career progression, but also these like teamwork formations. And you know, now I'll just go on a little bit of a tangent because I find this interesting. You know, I think marketplaces, especially of service workers, you know, are like really close-knit communities when it's 50 and 100 and 200 people. But then it keeps scaling and it's thousands and thousands of people and it totally breaks because there's no individual attention, there's no personalization. You're just like a cog in the wheel. It doesn't feel right. But I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from the gaming industry. So, you know, I play a fair amount of mobile games and used to play Call of Duty and stuff like that before I had kids. And the gaming industry has figured this all out. They know it. It's like organize in clans of no more than 50 people and show like, look at the progression that you have in games. You know, you unlock these new things, you gain badges, you do all this happy stuff. And it's not about gamification, because that's just this really silly term we made up. But I think it's more about human psychology and motivational psychology and things like that. And it works really well when you have these small pods, and I think a lot of marketplaces I know are experimenting with this notion of kind of the master and apprentice, right? Like onboarding is really hard. So, but there are lots of people that are very good and very interested in helping people come along and actually love training and mentoring and doing things like that. And so let's pair them up to, you know, give every individual kind of this peer coach, which I think is a potentially really powerful model. But as I said, there's not a lot of great examples of it yet. I think it's something that's going to be coming in the next few years, I guess. Hopefully.
Cool. And then maybe we have time for one more question. Chris, did you want to come on? Did you have a? Or did anyone else have one last question? Because we're almost running out of time.
I actually just wanted to ask a question. This is Suzanne again. Kind of building on what you were just talking about, you know, sort of the question of upskilling or team formation on marketplaces. I kind of have a hypothesis of in a slightly different direction. I'm curious what your thoughts on it are, which is working within, you know, industry verticals and being kind of like a town center, community center that's not just offering the marketplace for, in our case, labor services, but adding to that products, so your supply can sell products and labor, and then becoming like, you know, knowledge center, communication center, so sort of combining things like Reddit, LinkedIn, TechCrunch,
Sure.
like just sort of different services. But it's, you know, it's my own theory, but I also know it sounds like radically ambitious and maybe, you know, crazy. So curious, you know, what you think about that.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely an opportunity, especially like I mean, Rig Up is probably one of the better examples of this. I don't know if you guys all know Rig Up. It's a oil and gas industry, but it's horizontal. So it's like everything in the oil and gas industry. And you know, that industry is big enough that, yeah, they can just build a horizontal thing within that. And there's thousands and thousands of different suppliers and stuff like that. And I do think it's a real opportunity. You know, I also think it's something similar to the chemicals industry, which is like $4 trillion. But it's all still like Google searches and PDFs, and there's no centralized community for this stuff. And, you know, it's almost like people are just picking off what people do lots of Google searches for, and making these little industry verticals for it. So I think it's a very real opportunity. And you know, I think all I'll say, if I was doing it, I'd probably start with more like just a community angle, and not try to build anything too complex, like literally just, as you said, a Reddit board, and just see if you can get activity and traction, and then see where it leads. But that's a good way to get it started because it's relatively simple and, you know, easily measurable, and then you get the community going.
Awesome. We're almost out of time, but man, this is super insightful, Josh. So I really appreciate it. Did you have any, you know, any last kind of best? We'll go with the best question that you recommended earlier. So, what's your best kind of actual piece of advice for us as early stage marketplaces?
My best piece of advice is, you know, I've talked a lot about this sort of stuff and frameworks and things like that. But all I can say is, you know, I think stay focused on quality. It's mistakes I've made in the past, and you know, it always pays dividends if you really are focused on quality transactions. And I think that's the most important point. Just focus on quality, build these virtuous cycles, get the flywheel going, really understand it, and keep going.
Cool. Well, great. Well, and then also, where can we find you at? Just kind of a plug on that.
Yeah. So yeah, blog at A Crowded Space, and you're all welcome to reach out. I'm Josh at jsv.com. Pretty easy. And yeah, keep in touch. Let me know how it's going. I love marketplace entrepreneurs. You guys are all crazy enough to try it and not do just a simple software company. Try to balance multiple sides of an equation. So stay focused.